This screencast was put together to help others gain a better understanding of how we assess learning in school using standards. We'll talk about standards-based grading and what that is, the goal of standards-based grading, how standards-based grading differs from traditional letter grades, how teachers assess students using standards, and how we measure student progress. To start off with, I'd like to walk you through a Charlie Brown cartoon that helps to illustrate challenges that students and parents may face if assessment criteria isn't clear. In this case, the character Lucy has just received a grade of C on her coat hanger sculpture, but is confused as to how this was determined. Was the work judged on her talent, her effort, what she learned about the project, the quality of the coat hanger itself? When students are unclear about what is expected of them, or unclear about how they will be graded, it's hard to meet the expectations. It becomes a guessing game. This has always been a main push behind standards-based grading and assessing. Clarity around what we expect kids to know and do, and clarity around what that looks like when it comes time to assess their learning. So what is standards-based grading? Standards-based grading measures the mastery of the learning objectives, or how well students understand the material in class. It's based on a specific set of standards that students need to meet for each grade or content level. Marks are not a comparison of one student to another, but rather a way to measure how well students are doing on grade level standards. A standards-based approach allows parents and students to understand more clearly what is expected of students and how to help them become successful in their educational program. So what is the goal of standards-based grading? Well, the primary goal of standards-based grading is to improve student achievement by focusing instruction and the alignment of curriculum with the essential standards. Standards-based grading and reporting provides better communication to students, parents, teachers, and administrators on what each student knows and is able to do according to the identified standards, and separately assesses the influence of positive and consistent learning habits on student learning. So how does standards-based grading differ from traditional letter grades? Well, standards-based grading informs us what students have actually learned and know. Standards-based grading measures students' knowledge of grade-level content over time by reporting the most recent consistent levels of performance. So, a student may struggle in the beginning of a grading period with a new concept, but then learns and demonstrates proficient performance by the end of the grading period. In traditional grading, the student's performance for the whole grading period would be averaged, and early scores that were low would be averaged together with proficient performance later in the course, resulting in lower scores. In standards-based grading, a student who reaches proficiency would be reported proficient, and the report would reflect their current performance level. In standards-based grading, learning habits are reported separately in order to give a more accurate report of student progress. So how do teachers assess students? Well, teachers start with the end in mind, looking at the subject standards to see what students need to know or be able to do. Next, they identify and communicate out to students what the evidence would be that says a student is proficient in that standard. Once students know what proficiency looks like, they have an easier target to reach. An example of this would be a rubric for a project that is tied to the standard and spells out what a student needs to do to demonstrate proficiency. Teachers also use a variety of assessment tools to gather this evidence, from tests and quizzes to projects and presentations. As mentioned earlier, measuring student progress isn't a matter of averaging all the scores that students get over time. Each time a standard is assessed, students have a new opportunity to show their proficiency. We focus on the most recent evidence to tell us where a student is relative to that standard. Teachers also provide practice opportunities with a standard, called formative assessment. These formative assessments don't count toward their overall performance, but do give students feedback which helps them to learn. Summative assessments happen when students have had enough practice opportunities and have had feedback to help them in their learning. These assessments do count toward their overall progress. We let students know if they're on proficiency or at proficiency or above, if they're approaching the standard, or if they're at limited at this particular time. Using Star Wars as a metaphor, think of advanced as your Jedi Master and proficient as your Jedi Knight, which is where you want all of our students to be. Sometimes a student is on track, has a partial understanding of the standard, or is almost there. This is kind of like a Padawan who is still working towards becoming a Jedi Knight, but hasn't made it quite yet. Limited is a little like the youngling, who hasn't yet demonstrated enough evidence at this time to say he or she is making sufficient growth. This is similar to beginning stages of learning something. Well, this concludes the presentation on standards-based grading. For more information on our report cards, please refer to our report card screencast. Thank you.